Good to see you. Glad you're doing well. It's kind of strange in the prayer request to see the two Dr. Ogea's names there side by side, and still trying to get used to that. And a lot of y'all have been shortening that and calling me Dr. O. Well, I don't know what you're going to do with Andrew. You're going to figure that out, you know. I'll let you figure that one out. So we're going to try to announce this when we get it all squared off, but it looks like that Andrew's first Sunday and my last Sunday will be together on Father's Day. That's the way it's looking right now, and we're going to do a new pastor installation service. You're going to like it. I'm going to be nervous, but that's okay. And we hope it's all going to go well, they'll be able to make their transition by that time. Thank you for praying for them. He resigned from his church Sunday, and that's always an emotional time when you have to do that, and when you've been there that long. And so pray for him and the family. Pray for that church. As you might guess, some sadness, some disappointment, but gladness also, happy for him and where they're coming and so forth. And continue to pray for them in the transition as they seek out schools for the children, my grandchildren, and figure out where they're going to live and all that. It's going to all be okay, but as you know, it takes a while for everything to be okay. So just pray for them as you think about it. Do that. And Johnny, I guess it'd be all right to do the Ezra 7:10 for them, right? Yeah, okay. Just keep doing that 7:10 and just change it now. You're not praying for the new pastor. He's already here. I mean, you've already made that choice, but you could just carry it on for the Ezra 7:10. All right. So tonight we are coming to the close of the tribulation, the Great Tribulation. Finally, you know, it's 3/4 of the book, 3/4 of the book of Revelation dealt with the Great Tribulation, chapters 6 through 18. And so we come now to chapters 17 and 18 tonight. And this is a continuation of the seventh bowl of God's wrath. That we looked at the 7 bowls last week. And what we find now in chapter 17 is a continuation of that. Chapter 16, verse 19, just to remind you, the Babylon the Great was remembered in God's presence. He gave her the cup filled with the wine of his fierce wrath. So now what we have going on in 17 and 18, we have unfolded for us in graphic detail Babylon. And the reason Babylon now is center stage, next week we'll look at chapter 18, which are the 7 dooms of Babylon. But we got to deal with 17 today because this starts the very phenomenal ending of the Great Tribulation. Now, we've said from the very beginning when we looked at the tribulation, Jesus called it the Great Tribulation. As we begin to look at that, and if you followed your chart, it started with a series of 7. The 7 seals were opened, the 7 trumpets sounded, the 7 key figures, the 7 bowls of wrath. And we said this over and over again as things move forward in the tribulation. The first 3.5 years sort of seem to move slowly as John as it is unveiled before him as he's seeing these visions. But we said over and over again that the intensity level gets worse as we go forward. Everything just magnifies. And when you really try to consider what's going on here, what will go on, and again, thank goodness we're not going to be a part of that. We who are the redeemed are going to be delivered out of that. But it's almost mind-boggling. And now we've got this little interlude. So, although it's not on the chart, we've seen 3 interludes. now then, this is almost like a fourth interlude because it is a segue to the announcement of the great marriage supper in chapter 19. So we put 17 and 18 together. Tonight we'll look at 17, the scarlet woman and the beast. Next week we'll look at the seven dooms of Babylon. And those two chapters together are going to bring the great tribulation, the 7 years, to an end. So let's sort of divide the chapter into three parts. The first 6 verses, as I have in your notes, give us 10 distinguishing marks of the scarlet woman and the beast that carries her. So what I want to do is walk our way through a verse at a time, and then we'll deal with the 10 distinguishing marks, and some of them are there 2 maybe in one verse. In fact, one verse has 3 of them. So I tried to divide it out where it wouldn't be it wouldn't be confusing to you. So let's see if we can walk our way through it. So 17 verse 1, then one of the 7 angels who had the 7 bowls. Remember the 7 bowls, each angel carried a bowl and poured out the bowl of God's wrath. So one of those 7 angels now comes and speaks to John. One of the 7 angels who had the 7 bowls came and spoke with me. And here's what the angel said to John. Come, I will show you the judgment of the notorious prostitute. Boy, what a name, huh? Who is seated on many waters. All right, so who is this scarlet woman? Well, there are 2 of the distinguishing marks here in this verse. One, she is the notorious prostitute. The word there is the Greek word pornes or porneia. We get our word pornography or pornographic from it. It literally defines sexual immorality in general. Any kind of sexual immorality or debauchery. The old King James term for it, you remember, was licentiousness. When I was a kid growing up, we always had the King James Version, and some of those words I never could figure out what they meant. And that was a word that always intrigued me. Licentiousness, I couldn't hardly pronounce it, what that means. Well, it's just, we would call it any kind of debauchery, just riotous living. And prostitution defines a way of life. So what John is seeing here is not just this prostitute, but it's defining a way of life. And she is seated, number 2, the second character trait, on many waters. Now what is that? Well, it will skip down to verse 15. The waters that you saw where the prostitute was seated are peoples, multitudes, nations, and languages. So this prostitute, this scarlet woman, is going to deceive, is going to manipulate, is going to really indebt herself, engage herself with peoples, multitudes, nations, and languages. All right, verse 2, the kings of the earth committed sexual immorality with her. And listen, just as we work through this, the language is very graphic. The kings of the earth committed sexual immorality with her, and those who live on the earth became drunk on the wine of her sexual immorality. Such graphic description. So here's the third distinguishing mark. This scarlet woman is involved in an adulterous relationship which suggests a dangerous union of church and state. Remember, this is very deceptive. Now remember who is still here. Who is left on planet Earth? It's not the redeemed. It's not us. It's not anybody who has accepted Christ. It's all those who have rejected Christ. And it's all those who have survived up to this point, all the tribulation, catastrophe, and chaos. And remember, we saw last week that regardless of how bad things got, 2 times in chapter 16, it tells us that they did not repent and turn to God. In the midst of all that they were witnessing and seeing, they did not repent and turn to God. So we then are introduced to this adulterous relationship. And we're going to see a little bit more of that next week when we look at the doom of Babylon. Verse 3, then he carried me away in the spirit to a wilderness. Who's that remind you of? Remember Jesus was carried away once by the Spirit into a wilderness? He said, I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet beast. So not only is this scarlet woman, but she's on a scarlet beast with blasphemous names and had 7 heads and 10 horns. All right, so here's the fourth hint of who this is. Who is this scarlet woman? She's riding the beast. This is none other than the beast that rose up out of the sea we saw back in chapter 13, representing the political entity of the last days. So again, the deception that's going on here by those who are left behind, they're going to be deceived not only by Satan and the Antichrist and the false prophet that we have already talked about, but they're going to be received by this scarlet woman and the beast that she's riding on. Verse 4, the woman was dressed in purple and scarlet, adorned with gold, jewels, and pearls. She had a golden cup in her hand filled with everything detestable. Listen to this. The cup in her hand filled with everything detestable and with the impurities of her prostitution. Wow. I mean, you just can't hardly imagine the graphic description. So here are 2 other character traits. She is adorned with incredible wealth and royalty, represented by gold, jewels, and pearls. And her life is filled, she represents everything detestable. Now that's a word we don't use a lot of, is it? I mean, if we talk about something that's detestable, what does that mean? It means you just can't hardly imagine it. You just can't hardly stand to listen to it, hear, to be around it. Detestable. You can't hardly say it without sort of being a frown. Detestable. Everything detestable and with the filth of her adulteries. All right, now verse 5. On her forehead was written a name, a mystery. Babylon the Great, the mother of prostitutes and of the detestable things of the earth. So this verse gives us 3 more distinguishing marks. Mark number 7, her forehead bears a mysterious name. The Greek word there we've already seen in Revelation is the word mysterion. It is a fact or secret, not that we can humanly reason, but that has to be revealed to us by God. For example, it's the same word Paul used in 1 Corinthians chapter 13 when he talked about one day all the mysteries will be cleared up. Same word there. So what happens when we leave this earth and get to heaven? All of the mysteries are going to be cleared up. The secrets, and only God can do that. We can't reason with them. There are a lot of questions we have in this life. You have questions. I have questions. I wish Louis Reams was here tonight. I was going to turn to Louis at this point and say, Louis, because Louis always comes up, Jack, doesn't he, and asks me a question. He does that on Sunday and he does that on Wednesdays. I like that. That's fine. But some of them I can't answer. You have questions. I have questions. We don't have the answers to them in this life, do we? We can't have the answers to them. It's not up for us to figure out the answers. Only God has the answers of these mysteries. And here is one of them. She is called Babylon the Great. Now, again, we have already been introduced to Babylon earlier in Revelation, but now then, the full scope of Babylon and what Babylon will represent is right here in front of us. This is the ancient city of Babylon, located on the banks of the Euphrates River. First revealed to us in Genesis chapter 10 and 11. Remember the Tower of Babel. So that was the first introduction we have of Babylon. Destroyed by the Medo-Persian Empire of King Darius. I don't have time to go back and read the references. I put them here in your notes. Daniel, Isaiah, and Jeremiah all have references to Babylon. Many of the Old Testament prophecies about Babylon are unfulfilled. Now, you know about prophecy, right? Old Testament prophecy, biblical prophecy, there are a few prophecies in the New Testament. All of these must be fulfilled. Why have a prophecy if it's never going to come to pass? God gives us prophecies looking ahead because He knows that one day He's going to fulfill those for us. Well, now all of the prophecies of Old Testament prophecies of Babylon have not been fulfilled until now. Now we're seeing why Babylon was such an enemy, an arch enemy of the Israelites and the Jewish people, and what Babylon represented in the Old Testament. Now, here in chapter 17 and 18 of Revelation, now it's going to make sense to us. Number 9, or distinguishing mark number 9. She's called the mother of prostitutes and the detestable things of the earth. Enough said. I don't think we need to even try to explain what that means. Chapter 6. Then I saw, verse 6, verse 6. Then I saw the woman was drunk with the blood of the saints and with the blood of the witnesses to Jesus. Wow. Now, we've already talked a lot about the martyred saints. Who are they? They're the ones who became believers after the tribulation. They're the ones left behind that became believers out of the great revival, harvest revivals that were going on, the 144,000 witnesses that were the Jewish evangelists. And many of them, even after they were saved, sometime almost within a short distance after they were saved, the short-lived Christianity, they were martyred. They were killed. They were assassinated. And we saw all of that earlier in the book of Revelation. Well, this woman, this great prostitute, is drunk on their blood. What a picture this is. So Babylon, now let's talk about it. We'll talk about it more next week, but let's just now talk about it for a minute. Babylon represents a world system of false religion, which is directly opposed to God, His only begotten Son, and His church. Directly opposed. Now, we know about Satan's opposition toward God and toward Jesus Christ, don't we? We know how Satan opposed Jesus. And we know that Jesus died on the cross and defeated Satan forever, even though He's let loose. We know about all the false religions. We know about false prophets. John would write in 1 John about these false prophets and how we need to test the spirits to see if they're true or not. So Babylon now seems to be almost a representation of all of that wrapped up into one. And notice the words there at the end of verse 6. John said, when I saw this scarlet woman in the beast, and all of her graphic description, he said, I was greatly astonished. Now that's the first time John has expressed that. Think about all the visions that John has seen in the book of Revelation thus far. He's seen some terrible things. He's seen some wonderful things. Things have been revealed to him that have brought, encouragement to him and encouragement to the church. Those great chapters 2 and 3, the messages to the church. And he's seen all throughout the Revelation, never once did John ever express himself as being greatly astonished until now. What was it? What was it that sort of took his breath away? The word astonished there is thuma. It's often translated wonder. Remember in the book of Acts, the church was experiencing signs and wonders? Same word, wonder. A wonder is wonder are things that happen that just almost take our breath away. It's almost like that was a God thing. It's sort of like the wow moment. Oh, it's like takes your breath away. Well, now John doesn't just have a wonder. What does he have? He's got a mega wonder. Now we know what mega is, right? He's got a mega wonder. It says he was greatly astonished. What was it that took his breath away? Well, it must have been when he saw in its full personification this scarlet woman, this notorious prostitute that represents Babylon, and a religious system posing and pretending to be God but not really God, and be truth but not really truth, impersonating the work of Satan. When he saw that, it just took his breath away. Wow. Now then, the second part I want to deal with tonight of chapter 17 is John's response to that astonishment. That's verses 7 through 12. The angel said to me, "Why are you astonished? I will explain to you the mystery of the woman and of the beast with the 7 heads and the 10 horns that carries her. The beast that you saw was and is not and is about to come up from the abyss and go to destruction. Those who live on the earth whose names have not been written in the book of life from the foundation of the world will be astonished when they see the beast that was and is not and is to come." All right, now there's this book of life. We're first introduced to the book of life back in chapter 3. The message to the Sardis church. Revelation chapter 3. Here was part of the message to that church. The one who conquers will be dressed in white clothes, and I will never erase his name from the book of life. First time that was ever mentioned. It's not been mentioned until now again. Here it comes. The book of life. Now, I'm only going to have to tell you. I'm going to tease you, but I'm only going to have to tell you. We're going to understand what the book of life is and what's in the book of life and how God is going to use it when we get to chapter 20 and 21. So you're just going to have to wait till we get there, okay? But now then, it comes up for the second time, this book of life. And notice what is said of it. It has existed from the foundation of the world. That is, God has had a book of life that He's been writing names in from the very beginning of the foundation of the world. This calls for a mind that has wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman is seated. They are also 7 kings. 5 have fallen, 1 is, and the other's not yet come. And when he comes, he must remain for only a little while. The beast that was and is not is itself an 8th king, but it belongs to the 7 and is going to destruction. The 10 horns you saw are 10 kings who have not yet received a kingdom, but will receive authority as kings with the beast for 1 hour. Now, John would have understood this. These 7 kings, to John, would have represented the 7 kingdoms or world powers that were constantly opposed and oppressive to the people of God. Intense persecution. You know them. They're all over the Old Testament. Egypt, in the book of Exodus, Assyria, Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece. Those would represent the 5 who've fallen. See, all of those kingdoms have gone. They no longer exist. So the 6th one could only be Rome. That was the world power that existed in John's day. They all lived under Roman rule. So the 6th one would be Rome. And the 7th is the one now being revealed. And the 8 belongs to the 7. So the one now being revealed is Babylon come back to life. And so now it's starting to make sense. Verses 13 and 14, the purpose of the beast and his cohorts. So what's the purpose of this beast with his scarlet woman. These have one purpose, and they give their power and authority to the beast. These will make war against the Lamb. Who's the Lamb? Jesus, the Lamb of God. They'll make war against the Lamb. I get a little emotional when I read this next part, don't you? But the Lamb will conquer them, because he is the Lord of lords and King of kings. And those with him. Who is that? That's us. Those with him are called, chosen, and faithful. That triad right there, ladies and gentlemen, describes who we are as the people of God and who we ought to be and who we need to be. We are the called. We are the chosen. And we are the faithful. So what does it mean to be a believer and a follower of Jesus Christ? It means that you're called. You know, the call of God into your life. And you answered the call. You answered the call to salvation, to follow Jesus. You answered the call for the Lord to deploy you in the kingdom of God to do what you're doing. You answered the call. And because you answered the call, then you're one of God's chosen. You know, Peter said it this way: we are a royal priesthood. We're the ones that have been chosen to do the work of God and to be keepers of the kingdom here on earth. And we're faithful. The greatest thing that can be said of us as believers is that we're called, chosen, and faithful. Now then, we got to immediately shift gears from this wonderful, encouraging verse to verse 15. The angel also said to me, the waters you saw where the prostitute is seated are the peoples, multitudes, nations, and languages. We described that a moment ago. The 10 horns you saw and the beast will hate the prostitute. They will make her desolate and naked, devour her flesh, and burn her up with fire. In other words, all evil, all demonic spirits are going to turn on each other, and it's almost like they're going to cannibalize each other. For God has put it into their hearts to carry out his plan by having one purpose, and to give their kingdom to the beast until the words of God are fulfilled. Okay, remember I said a moment ago that all prophecy has to be fulfilled. So now we're seeing all the prophecies yet to be unfulfilled are now going to start to be fulfilled. And the woman you saw is the great city that has royal power over the kings of the earth. So now we have the hint of who the woman is and represents, the Babylon the Great. So this is a segue into chapter 18, the fall of Babylon the Great and the end of the Great Tribulation. And again, so if you take a look at your chart, we're to that next to last column, the last of the sevens, the 7 dooms of Babylon. And we're going to come to that next week. And so next week, we're going to end the tribulation. Woo, boy, you know, we're finally going to get to the end of all the unpleasant bad parts, but we had to go through that. Because now then, once we get to the end of the tribulation, the last part of Revelation, 19, 20, 21, 22, are going to make so much sense. And it's going to be so wonderful and victorious for us to look at the marriage supper of the Lamb and the glory of heaven and the last words of the Bible. So I have an application here for you. I'll sort of let you read that yourself. How do we make application? Again, as I've said, when you take Scripture and you interpret it, you study it, you preach it, you receive a sermon, you always want to say, okay, that was then, the Bible is then, that's the what, now so what? So when I preach, when I get ready to share on Sunday and I get a passage in my mind and I'm looking at it and studying it and seeing what the what is, I don't want to spend so much time in the what that I don't start thinking about so what. Okay, what? But now what does that mean for us? And so that's what we're going to have to do here as we work our way through the end. We've been doing it. Application. What? So what? Well, so what? What does that mean to us? Well, we are the people of God. And therefore, we cannot in any way flirt with the false religion. We cannot have one foot in the world and one foot, in the things of God. We can't straddle a fence. We can't be, as John described it again in 1 John, we can't be of the world. We have to live in the world, but we can't be of the world because we are the bride of Christ. And that's what's coming, the marriage supper of the Lamb. The bride is going to present herself. We, the bride of Christ, the church, we're going to be presented to the groom. And this great wedding is going to be so exciting. I leave you with this. I put in your notes Paul's description of this in Ephesians 5, where he talked about husbands must love your wives just as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her, cleansing her with the washing of water by the word. He did this to present the church to himself. Now we get to the marriage supper in Revelation 19. The bride is going to be presented to himself in splendor. I mean, what's more splendid than a bride standing at the back of the building waiting to be escorted in to meet the groom up front? I mean, I still, it'll be 47 years next week for Vicki and I. I still have the mental picture of when I saw her for the first time in her wedding splendor, ready to come down to meet me and be my bride. And Paul said, when we the bride are presented to the groom, he's going to receive us without spot or wrinkle. Now, I'll let you figure out what that means. Here's what I think it means. Who wants to see a bride with a white wedding gown with spots or stains on it and wrinkled? How absurd is that? You'd be aghast if you went to a wedding and the bride walked in, stood at the back, and there's a big brown stain right on front of her wedding gown. And then she's got these wrinkles. What would you be thinking? What? How could she put that on with that spot there? Certainly she would have tried to get the spot out. Didn't she know how to remove the stain and wrinkles? Surely she could have pressed those wrinkles out. Well, think of this now. And this is the question. What is God going to have to do to get us, his church, ready to be presented to him without spot or wrinkle? What stains is he going to have to remove from us? What wrinkles is he going to have to press out from us? That can be a painful part of getting ready for the wedding, right? Just a thought. Okay, so we'll finish there. Thank y'all for listening tonight. Thank you for those who are on live stream for joining with us, and we'll see you next time, next week, for Revelation 18.